Bueno, ahora va a intervenir Marta. Marta Pernisova es una ingeniera agrónoma, es un producto de esta universidad. Ahora que está tan de moda la internacionalización, pues ella es una avanzada en ese campo. Lleva bastante tiempo en la Universidad de la Jalisco, una universidad puntera en investigación, es experta en servicios de los ecosistemas. Nos va a presentar además herramientas. Hemos hablado mucho de cómo hacer partícipe a la sociedad de la valoración de los servicios de los ecosistemas. Nos va a hablar de eso y de cómo visibilizar y mapear esos servicios. La verdad es que es una habilidad que hayas podido.
Bueno, os está diciendo que os quería agradecer muchísimo el haber invitado, estoy encantada. Y querría preguntar un poco antes de empezar, quiero saber qué tipo de gente hay aquí. ¿Podéis levantar la mano los que sois investigadores?
¿De qué campo? De todos.
¿Quiénes son estudiantes? ¿Hay alguien aquí a nivel de municipal o local de planificación urbanística? Uno. Muy importante. ¿Hay aquí algún agricultor?
Técnica de un sindicato agrario.
Muy bien. ¿No ves? Este es el tipo de gente que necesitamos tener. Muy bien. Y la otra cosa que quería hacer era daros la enhorabuena por tres motivos principales. El primero, por haberos atrevido a encargaros del huevo frito. Como sabéis, el huevo frito es la descripción de España, porque tiene en el centro Madrid y luego en la costa, y el resto está totalmente desconocido. Y yo creo que es un tema apasionante y la verdad es que os deseo que sigáis con ello adelante, porque es fundamental ahora a nivel europeo el tema del desarrollo, el abandono del campo. El segundo tema, os quiero felicitar, es porque creo que sois un equipo interdisciplinar en el que estáis trabajando arquitectos, agrónomos y forestales. Eso también es una cosa muy puntera, el que hayáis conseguido llegar a un idioma común y los conflictos, los trade-offs entre todas las clases. Y el tercer punto por el que os quiero felicitar es porque tenéis el gran coraje de, a pesar de llevar solo 10 meses, atreveros a presentar lo que habéis hecho con una audiencia tan crítica. O sea que eso también es muy admirable, porque la gente a veces le da vergüenza. Y ahora voy a seguir la presentación en inglés, porque me lo habías pedido tú también. Y si tenéis alguna pregunta durante la presentación, por favor no dudéis en preguntarme. La primera imagen es un poco el símbolo de lo que son los sistemas de ecoservicio, y es mover desde la parte de lo que se llaman los ecosistemas a la parte, veis aquí, lo que se ha nombrado ya, estoy hablando en español, espera. So moving from the left to the right, so from the ecosystem to the social system, and that is the reason I put in between the human beings, because this is a key issue in ecosystem services. And it was mentioned before during the last part of the discussion in the morning, and I think it's a fundamental issue. And I'm going to try, okay. So I have very little time, and I was trying to find out from all the work I am doing what can help you with ideas to continue. And maybe it's too many things, so I have to choose during the presentation what is. But in general lines, first I want to start, why are we all doing this? Because at the end is, why are we doing this? It has to be a reason. And then I am talking about the major societal challenges of this century and why we need to respond with the peri-urban areas, maybe. The second thing is the issue of delineation of peri-urban, that the scale matters, as you know. Third point is why using the concept of ecosystem services for peri-urban planning, why is this relevant? And then I have a selection of tools I have been working in, and I'm working in European projects. And it has been mentioned at the end of the presentation before, the TIF for cities, I think is kind of Bible if you want to apply the concept of ecosystem services. It's specifically for cities, and it has a very good basic methodology. The second thing, and it has been mentioned before, is a tool to involve from the very beginning of the project to the stakeholders. And I think this is really fundamental if you want to get commitment for the people and not to arrive at the end, look what we did, and now what are you going to do with that? It has to be done from the beginning and created with them. And it's a tool we have been creating in an European project on land use transitions, and it is more or less helping to decide the way we want to live, because the way we want to live is what it has to drive all these things. The press, you mentioned it before, the recreation, I have been working in that recreation part, but maybe I skip it because you have been talking already about that. And the last one is one tool we have been building for the European Environment Agency, and it's a tool, it is about what ifs. So it's to create scenarios with your stakeholders. I'm going to go round, and finally one conclusions. So the major societal challenges, why are we doing this, is the human population of Earth will be probably 9 billion people at the end of the century. Also, and that is also a fundamental thing in this presentation, is that most of the population is going to live in cities. They expect that 70% of the population will live already in 30 years, nearly in cities in the world, while we know that cities are occupying the less of the land cover. So it's a big contradiction that most of the population is living in the less space on Earth. But peri-urban areas are in a way starting to show that it's not going to be so small, the land cover, but it's growing like a small tumor around. And then here is how is the situation in Spain compared to the rest of the European Union. And you can see that, in fact, the most, you can see the urban morphological zones below that are like urban conglomerations. You see that Malta is the largest. I live in the Netherlands, and it's also one of the largest in Europe, with incredible amount of urban areas and population density. And Spain, so far, so good. I mean, it looks one of the countries or member states with the lowest urban morphological zones. But, as you have been finding already in your study, the most significant land use change observed in Spain from the 80s till 2000 has been a dramatic increase of the urbanization, and this is an increase of 30% compared with the European average of 14%. So Spain is trying to catch up in these bar diagrams we just saw. The urbanization process was not homogeneous, as I have been saying. It's called a fried egg. So it has been mainly in the center and in the coastal areas, especially in the Mediterranean coast. And as far as Corinne Landcover is saying, also in Navarra and in Madrid. As you said, the increase in urban areas was mainly at the expense of agricultural areas. And, well, probably the reason is that agriculture and forestry are the land covers that Spain occupy most part of the surface. So if you want to take something out, you take it for the largest one. And as we all know, cities were born in the best places for agriculture. So it's not strange they are taking that away. Other issue that has been in the presentation before, a major driver, is the global climate change. A very strong driver is as well the unparalleled deterioration of biodiversity. And I think a very important one, and that is relating with governance, is the decentralization of government that is happening all over the world. And for that reason, local authorities are becoming responsible for the local level service delivery to their citizens. And in your case, if you want to move on this, to implement what you are finding out, I think the local people, the local authorities, the municipalities are the best agents to cause this change. So, if we are to improve sustainable well-being of cities, we need to find ways that we question the business as usual lifestyle. And this has been mentioned this morning at the very beginning. I think Fernando Roch said that, and it has been mentioned several times this morning. This is a very short thing on the limitation, and it's just to show how relevant is the scale we work. It was an European project on rural development, and we created the typology, trying to move from this NUTS 2 level to really to the square kilometer level. And after a lot of thinking and thousands of indicators, we just did a principal component analysis, and we found out that a lot of indicators are very much interrelated, and at the end of the day, what it matters is the biophysical, so climatic things, the economic density, and also what's very relevant, the accessibility in time, not in distance, in time. So with these very basic elements, we created a typology in which you can see here the peri-urban. It was a typology for rural areas, and you see here the results, and it is at the square kilometer level. What it was really important at the beginning, it was that we didn't want to make a typology for the whole of Europe, because we realized that what is called rural in Spain is very different what is called rural in the Netherlands. I think I live in a rural area in the Netherlands, and I am sure if any of you will go there, you think it's a city. But for Dutch people, those are rural areas, and I think this is very important, what people think about the place they are living. So what we did was to consider clusters of regions that were related with the environment. So we didn't calculate relations regarding to the European average, but to the region we were talking about. And this is the final thing, and you can see what the big difference is. According to the OECD, rural areas in Andalusia will be divided like this, and you see this will be predominantly rural, and the orange is predominantly urban, and in between. And then when you move with different spatial scales, you can see here at municipality level, that at 1 square kilometer level, having 9 classes or 3 classes, that the whole thing changes. But I think with creativity, you can really achieve a more refined approach than the 10 kilometers if you think it's useful. Okay, and now moving to the concept of the ecosystem service for peri-urban planning. I think my main message in the presentation is why it is interesting to use the concept. It is because the value of nature for cities. And more than nature is about to live sustainable, because you are not working in silos, and this is the ecosystem and this is the economic part of the society. It is really making a bridge between both. And why they are so important for cities is because cities depend a lot on healthy environments. And then these benefits, I think, are known as ecosystem services. I think everybody knows by now what is ecosystem service, I assume. Or there are some people that still don't understand the question. Well, it seems it's a well-known concept. And examples are drinking water, clean air, healthy food, regulation of temperature with climate change, as it has been mentioned before. And I put here, for instance, in Amsterdam, you know, Amsterdam is crossed by the river Amstel, and this river really has a lot of impact in the health of the city. They have been improving a lot the quality of the water, and it is not only important for recreation, it's also part of the cultural story of the country, all the bridges, and the river really moves a lot of things together. So it's I think to me it's a very nice example of what water can mean as ecosystem service. Another thing is that in general, it is take it for granted, and I think countries as Spain, it's very common to think that nature is, yeah, there it is. We don't need to protect it. We have that always look about water. I mean, if you fly above Madrid and you are landing, the only thing you do is houses with swimming pools, and you know that there is no water. And so the general attitude is we have it, no problem, and that is it. But I think the concept of ecosystem services helps to appreciate what we have, because you give it a value. And therefore it is so important to use the concept to highlight the opportunities, but as well the trade-offs between the policy options, planning, or infrastructure choices. And you can see here a drawing made by two friends that are architects. And this is a plan for a peri-urban area in Bergen-op-Zoom, that is a city in Zeeland, in one of the provinces of the Netherlands. And this is a completely new concept in which you see that you have here a multifunctionality approach with housing, green areas, urban agriculture, water, use as recreation but also as transport. So, well, this is what they propose now to the town hall, and I think they have a high chance it will go on. So the ecosystems need to be factored into city planning, management, and budgets. And this is also something very important. We are not only talking about the ecological approach, but we have to move really to the economy, because in the society we live, we need to be realistic, and you have to talk also about economy. And if you want to include it in the planning, you have to talk about that. So from the point of view of ecology, the lack of information, understanding and planning about the effects of decisions can lead to loss of essential and beneficial ecosystem services, and this has been also mentioned this morning. Sometimes you can go too far, you create too much great infrastructure, and then it can take centuries before you get it back to other uses. Think about the forest. If you cut down a forest, or it is burned because bad land use management or whatever, it can take 100 years before you get it in a forest. And in the societal system, the suboptimal use of what is called the natural capital ends in loss of local welfare, city budgets, and business opportunities. So it is very important that planners, educators, and managers can move towards creating a sustainable city. But as you know, you see, the concept is not so easy. I mean, it is really understandable, and I think it's very much the way forward. But it means that you have to connect and integrate three dimensions: environmental, economic, and the decision-making process. And the language we talk is completely different, and the interests are different. So this is really the bottleneck of the concept: how to implement it and how to link these three ones. So to help to integrate it, I have been making a selection of tools that are available. I mentioned this. This is a key one, and probably you know it already. So it's the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity for cities. And it is not thought to be only for scientists at all, but it's really for urban planners and managers. And it is written in a very clear language with a lot of examples all over the world. So I really recommend you, I have the website, you can download it, and I think it's wonderful to use as kind of guideline to do things. This has been mentioned today also many times, all these concepts. Maybe this is too scientific, but I think it's important, if you want to apply it, that you really know what you're talking about. And this is the famous cascade, moving from the ecosystem and biodiversity to the human well-being. And you start with the biophysical structure. Then Eric mentioned this morning what is the difference between function, what is service that is linking the two boxes, the ecosystem and the socio-cultural one. You can see there with examples, a function can be, for instance, the water passage or biomass, and the service of biomass can be food production. And then you have human well-being are the benefits, and you were also mentioning today, yeah, we have indicators that are for services, and we have with health will be an indicator for benefits. And then you have finally the value that can be economic, and sometimes cannot be economic because it's impossible to give them a monetary value. But I think it's also very important to have clear the concepts. This is in the book I have been mentioning, and it's very useful, I think, maybe for you as well, to follow in your methodology all this stepwise process. I will go through it later on, but I think it's really advisable to have a look at it and to try to see if your methodology matches with that. And I think, so far as I see, you have been already doing a lot of things there. So the first step is to specify and agree on the problem. And the first thing is engaging stakeholders at an early stage, and is to identify the areas. So it's very clear you have peri-urban areas. This helps to avoid misunderstandings, all these kind of advantages that has to engage stakeholders from the very beginning. A very important one is the final one that helps to foster cooperation and consensus. And the participations will not only include scientists at all, but include the people directly affected by the decision. And regarding this inclusion of stakeholders from the very beginning is the tool I want to use from this project we are running down. And it's, it's a product we have been making with the University of Edinburgh and Denmark, Aarhus University. And there are workshops in which we just invite a group of about 20 stakeholders that are specialists in different topics like agriculture, forestry, urban planning, energy, water. You have to choose them according to that. And then you create with them visions for the future. So what they want to do in the future can be a long-term future, but can be also 5 years from now. And then we start by themselves, so their personal life, and then the second part is their expertise as from the sector, so you will be there as urban planners, or you will be there as a farmer, or agricultural, or whatever. And finally we move to the societal things, and we have been creating tools, and you can see here what is the individual tool. So you have 4 aspects of your personal life related to land use. So how you would like to live, and the goal is to stimulate the creative thinking about the future. And we use a kind of metaphor, so it's a storyboard as you have in a comic. We have pre-selected images, but these pre-selected images are linked very much to land use. And the users can add comments as text. And you can see here, for instance, we have the 4 key aspects in your daily lives that have implications on land use, and it's how it will be your house, your work, how it will be your recreation, and how it will be the food you eat. So in this case, we have been doing that already, and we come to very interesting conclusions, like I think big majority of people in 2040, and we have been having already about 80 stakeholders, would like to work part-time, would like to work in their houses most of the time. I mean, this has important implications, or by bicycle. They would not like to have a corporate building. That means that if you're thinking about grey infrastructure and transport, as policymakers, this is interesting to know. Then you can compare the results between the individuals, you get quantitative information, and the people responded very positive. And the other thing we did was more in the sectoral part, and it is really related to the sector, so it's, you can see it here. You have again a set of images, and people can choose topics as ecosystem services, landscapes, for instance, agricultural products or whatever, and you create here with a group of people a canvas with a lot of information. And well, you see this is one of the final visions we got from one group of them. So density as opposed to urban sprawl, medium-sized cities, social contacts and services of general interest are near. So in a way very much fitting what you think as for your planning. 5 minutes. Ooh, then I have to hurry up. Well, the other one is the ecosystem services that are affected by the peri-urbanization. And you can find this in the tip one, but I think these 4 questions are really useful. You have in the book also, depending on the ecosystem services, which questions you can ask to your stakeholders. The third step is what information is needed, and select the methods, and there are qualitative methods, quantitative, and the monetary evaluation. And I don't know if you are planning to do some monetary evaluation, but maybe your colleagues of the Autónoma can help you with that. I don't know. And you can see here, also very useful in the TIP guidelines, all the possibilities you have to do monetary evaluation. They are very creative. And sometimes it's really nice to try to put things in money. A lot of times it's completely a dream, but it gives a good impression how relevant, for instance, pollination is measured in the way you need the bees for 80% of the crops. So what you get as a benefit from the crops is very much due to the bees. So if you will not have the bees to the benefits, you get to huge amounts of money. I mean, but this makes very relevant how important are the bees, because people in general take it for granted that you have bees around, but what they do is not very clear. Here, this is what you mentioned about the mapping of the different things. I have been participating in this team, and it was fantastic. We did in a very short time, we tried to do mapping of ecosystem services in Europe. And there are very, well, all the steps, but I don't have time for that now. But I mean, you can find out here. I have the links. There are 2 phases. One is the mapping. And then we focus in the second phase on water purification, recreation, and pollination. And we did also policy analysis with the scenarios. Well, you see here some of the maps. This is for Amsterdam. I wanted to include very much green urban areas in cities as ecosystem services, and we came to very nice results. I go through this. The interesting thing of this work is that it is now taken very seriously by DG Environment, and then it's going to be used, part of the methodology, to export to different member states as example of how it can be done mapping of ecosystem services at national level. Okay, the impact of policies, and this is the second book that is published 3 months ago. Then to assess future changes, I have this other tool, but I will not have time to present it, but I can show it to you later on. And it is avoiding this kind of black box models that are used in many projects. This is a very transparent model, and the interesting thing is that we have been developing with policymakers from the very beginning. So the tool is built for them to be used. It's not from scientists and then we go at the end. And this has been helping us a lot to create a transparent way to create with them the scenarios in a very short time. Because that was one of the questions of the agency when we got the project, is that they get questions from DG Environment, and they need to reply to these questions in a period of 3 months. And they go to us, to the modelers. The modelers say, oh, well, it takes us 2 years to give you an answer. So when they have to give the answer is not valid anymore. So they wanted to have something quick. Well, and this is the methodology. And it is mainly based, I will show you now, we use it in workshops that take only 2 days. We define the storylines, with them, and then we do a quick assessment, starting by the current state, and then we can make a lot of, we create with them the model that is very simple and very transparent, and then we can put qualitative information that is knowledge matrix, so you create with them, you can have, for instance, all the ecosystem services and the land cover for a specific region, and together with them you fill in the matrix, you put it into the model, you run it, you get your maps, you get your statistics, and you can get, you see here, the tool. So you create, in this wide space, you just simply draw things here, a library of data, and you make the connections, and then at the end you have the results. You can compare the maps, you can do algebra with them, you can get hotspots, you can make afterwards statistics with that, and then, so you see, you just draw it and you create the maps. And this is a knowledge matrix that you create with your stakeholders. You fill all these cells with them. For instance, this was for green infrastructure, to decide what is green, what is not green. And well, you create your rules. And you can zoom in, that is also quite interesting. You can get, for instance, for a region, you think, why? We thought this is green infrastructure, but this, I don't believe it. So you click there and then you get the critical path to get to that decision in your model. So then you decide, oh, we said that if we will have here arable land with this condition, then it will be green, but it is not really true. So you change your rule immediately and then you run it away and you check, is this more fitting my image? You can compare the results and the graphs, and you can make also, this for instance for ecosystem services, you can create also bar diagrams for trade-offs. And then I arrived to my last slide, is the conclusions. So I think the peri-urban areas offer a great opportunity to large-scale thinkers, people out of the box. You need to be creative. It was mentioned this morning. You need to think new, not to do the old things with new names. And I think the ecosystem service concept provides sustainable solutions to many of the problems associated with the current global trend of sprawling development. And I think the project you are running is a very valuable approach in this direction. And this is, if you want to visit me, you are all welcome in the Netherlands, in Wageningen, and this is one of the buildings we have in Alterra to work with. You can see that we are really keen on ecosystem services. Thank you.